What is up, everyone? It's Bob Freeman here to provide you with the best information in the world about the global economy. So, today's video is going to be a bit different. We're going to be going over a lot more information than we normally do. Um, Pretty much what we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be showing you where the economy has came from since the COVID lockdown had happened, where the United States economy is right now, and where I believe the United States economy will be going for the next few months. This is a lot of information, so go ahead and get comfortable, and I hope that you enjoy. So, the United States economy has seen some of the most rapid growth on record since businesses have reopened. More and more people are beginning to see improvement in their day-to-day lives, and some people believe that it will never end. Now, although production, employment, demand, consumer sentiment, all of these things are improving in the United States and have drastically improved since the COVID lockdowns, United States suppliers and manufacturers are still facing unresolved issues that have yet to be seen by consumers. The world's economy may continue growing for a few more months, but I believe that serious issues will begin surfacing later this year and the global economy will contract. So, during the first half of 2020, the United States recorded its largest contraction of GDP ever. You can see it right here on this graph I pulled up from Fred. This is real gross domestic product, so it's gross domestic product with adjusted for inflation. And this is the most general measure that people use to track economic growth. And we can see largest contraction that has ever happened in March of last year or April of last year. And during the same time, the Department of Labor, they received more applications for unemployment benefits than anyone had ever thought was possible. For a comparison, since this graph doesn't have the spike all the way to the top and show you the historical data, in the 2008-2009 financial crisis, March of 2009 was the worst month for employment during that recession. And during the month of March in 2009, over 2.5 million people applied for unemployment benefits. That's a lot of people. That was the record at the time. But in April of 2020, this spike right here, let's see, over 20 million people applied for unemployment benefits. That's a change from 2.5 million to 20 million people applying. That's insane in 1 month. Now, additionally, during this time frame, the Federal Reserve, they report capacity utilization for industrial production in the United States, and we can see that there was a sharp decline here in capacity utilization and just in the total index. And we can see as well here that capacity, the total capacity for industrial production in the United States has just remained flat since that time period. And this drop is insane in capacity utilization. I mean, it's nearly 20%. It's not quite 20%, but it's a large drop. And it remained below 70% through May and June. And it's really, this has stayed stagnant to this date. It's still not getting better. Same here with the total index for capacity utilization. It's improved, but it's not to where it was before. Apologize. I'm reading off of a paper here. I did a lot of preparation for this video. Now, during the same time, retail sales And food sales also took a large dip. And that's actually over 20% in just 2 months, which is insane. A very, very large dip. Now, what's going on right now? Because this happened about a year ago. It's it's important to look at what happened a year ago so we can figure out what's going to happen in the future and what's happening right now. But what I've told you is old news. We knew all of this. It happened last year. It's pretty well known. But what's going on right now? Well, right now, we're in the middle of a very, very fast recovery. You can see here, real GDP, it improved. It improved by a full 8% during the last half of 2020. And for reference, real GDP has not grown by more than 5% over the course of any given calendar year since the dot-com era. So 8% increase in half of a year is a very, very fast recovery. Another indicator that we use to track economic growth in the United States is the Institute of Supply Management's report on business. And I've only pulled up these reports, the quantitative data, but I highly encourage you to read them for yourself. They're free on the Institute of Supply Management's website. They have one for manufacturers in the United States, and they have one for service companies in the United States. And what it will tell you in these reports, the person who puts them together, Fior, it said that things have been getting better in manufacturing for the past 11 months. And the person who puts together the report for services, Neves, he said the same thing for services. We've seen economic growth in services for 11 consecutive months as well. So not only is gross domestic product showing us that we're seeing a recovery in the economy, but the Institute of Supply Management is telling us the same thing. And GDP only comes out, they only report GDP once every quarter. So looking at the Institute Supply Management's report that comes out every month, it can give us a more up-to-date idea of if the economy is growing or contracting. And for the past 11 months, these reports have told us that the United States has seen growth in both manufacturing and in services. So, employment has also improved dramatically just during the first quarter of 2021. Uh-oh, I lost. There it is. So, weekly, there's 25% less people applying for unemployment insurance than were at the beginning of the year. It's a huge decrease of 25% in just a quarter of a year. So employment is getting better. Initially, I know that the news recently has been saying some bad things about the non-farm payrolls, and I'll be honest, this number is not up to date. I didn't put in the most recent month, but the most recent month also showed an adding of jobs. It just wasn't as much jobs added as expected. And by looking at initial and continued jobless claims, although this is starting to flatten, unless we see anything really, really strange, employment's getting better. In my opinion, anything the news is saying about employment not getting better is full of it. I mean, in a way, certain sectors are need employment right now, but the unemployment rate isn't necessarily a problem. People are getting money whether or not they're working from, unemployment benefits, but also from stimulus packages. Now, additionally, another indicator showing that the economy has gotten better this year and is continuing to grow is the University of Michigan's consumer survey. And now, while consumer sentiment has not reached what it was prior to COVID happening, it has increased 3%. Since since the start of 2021. Uh, I don't have the exact figure for since COVID recovery, but since the start of 2021, it's increased by 3%, which is a good increase for consumer sentiment over the course of just a few months. Now, additionally, another way to see how consumers are feeling about the economy is, I mean, we could just look at how much they're spending. If consumers are spending more, they probably are feeling better about the economy. If they're spending less, saving their money, they probably feel worse about it. And the advanced sales for retail, trade, and food services is just at an all-time high. Consumers are spending more now than they ever have throughout United States history. So demand is definitely there. There's nothing wrong with the consumer right now as far as lack of demand is concerned. Now, this all looks really good. I mean, consumers are spending more. They've been spending more now since June of 2020 than they were prior to COVID happening. A lot of people are seeing this as a sign that the economy is going to see a huge improvement over the next few months, and we're going to see more rapid growth later into the year. But I think that there's still many unresolved problems, and while consumer sentiment has reached an all-time high, we can see that industrial production has not fully recovered. The total index has not recovered to pre-COVID levels, and capacity utilization has not reached pre-COVID levels either, as well as the total capacity has just remained flat or gone down. Now, the 10-year average for capacity utilization is 75%. And we can see that we reached 75% here, but we're really struggling to hold our 10-year average of capacity utilization, which is a huge problem considering that we're spending much more than we have ever spent throughout history. Now, another concern is the Institute of Supply Management. For the past several months, they've been reporting price increases across all commodities, and have reported shortages across all commodities. And that's not just for manufacturing, but that's for services as well. It's everyone is facing these problems and has been facing these problems for several months. Additionally, we can see in the prices sub-index of the non-manufacturing index, as well as the manufacturing sub-index for prices, we're seeing a sharp increase. Any number above 50 means growth, and if it's growing larger and larger above 50, it means that it's growing faster and faster, and that's prices for manufacturers in the United States. They're at levels that have never been seen before. We can see the exact same thing happening with services companies. And if you want to see it from an entirely another source, the United States Census Bureau has the Producers' Prices Index, which is released a little bit after the Institute of Supply Management's report. And it will tell you that for the total index, sorry, I'm trying to zoom in here, make it look better for you. All right, that's not going to work. So you can see, obviously, this line is going up. Producer prices are going up a lot. I've tracked the 3-month change in the past 3 months. You see 5.4% increase in producer prices. In the past 1 month, we've seen a 2.3% increase in producer prices. It's a lot over just the course of a month, over just the course of 3 months. It's levels that are very rarely seen. Now, additionally, the Consumers Inventories subindex of the Institute of Supply Management's Report on Business for Manufacturing has reported the lowest levels ever. Customers' inventories of United States manufacturers are contracting at a pace faster than we've ever seen. So these are the lowest levels the customers' inventories sub-index has ever seen. And Fior, the dude who puts together these reports, if you want me to be more specific about who he is, he's the chair of the Institute of Supply Management Manufacturing Business Survey Committee. He stated for the second consecutive month, this sub-index has registered its lowest reading since the sub-index was established in 1997. For 9 straight months, the Customers' Inventories Index has been at historically low levels. Now, while the Inventories sub-index is not showing, the inventories of manufacturers aren't showing the same thing that customers' inventories are showing, they're still not looking good. They're still contracting and showing very little growth. And if you read the qualitative data that's included on the actual report on the Institute of Supply Management's website, the manufacturers are telling you that there's some serious problems happening with their inventories, regardless of what this number is saying. To be more specific, Fior stated inventories remain unstable due to ongoing supplier constraints. In April, supplier deliveries were not able to keep up with new order and production levels, causing a measurable drawdown in raw material inventories at panelists' companies. Now, finally, speaking of raw materials, let's talk about China for a second, just for a second. China is the United States' largest trading partner, and data that comes from the Chinese government should be taken with a grain of salt, but large changes are pretty difficult for them to hide, and they're likely to be reported. And the Purchasing Managers Index for manufacturing, that's released monthly by the National Bureau of Statistics of China, is probably the most relevant economic information you're going to be able to get about China, because the vast majority of China's economy is dedicated towards exported goods and manufacturing, and really other information that's released by China's government, like information about their services industry or their consumer sentiment or their employment rate, is either going to be irrelevant because it's either going to be insignificant on a global scale, or it's information that the Chinese government is going to have some interest in falsifying. However, this information is going to be, I'm not saying they won't falsify it, but it's going to be much more difficult for them to do so, and they have much less interest in doing so, is my point. Now, so, despite any possible conflict of interest that China's government might have with the United States, since November, the two components of China's Purchasing Managers Index for manufacturing that have shown the most growth are Raw Material Purchase Price Index, right here. That's obviously seen a lot of growth. And the Producer Prices Index, right here. This next measurement might have some interest in being falsified. Expected Production and Business Activities Index. I'm not sure if that's actually growing or if the Chinese government just wants us to believe that it's growing. Now, the two sub-indexes on here that have shown the most amount of contraction are the In-Hand Orders Index, as well as the Finished Goods Inventory Index. And it should also be mentioned that raw materials inventory index, as well as supplier delivery time index, has shown little to no growth. If anything, it's shown contraction. And that's not a good thing at all when looking at the United States situation with supply chains. Now, these issues have been persisting for a good amount of time. They've been persisting for several months in the global supply chain. And these effects are just now beginning to reach consumers. Last week, last weekend, I read a article in the Wall Street Journal, and it was in the newspaper. It was a physical newspaper, and what they reported I thought was pretty frightening. Now, I'm not really a big fan of the news, but I mean, this was some really good qualitative data, I thought, directly from some of the largest major food suppliers in the United States. Uh, so, according to the article, which was titled Retailers Press Food Suppliers, Walmart and Cisco are just now starting to penalize their suppliers for late and incomplete deliveries. And they've turned a blind, apparently they've been turning a blind eye to these problems for a few months, but now they're just kind of starting to put the pressure on to their suppliers. Food suppliers have blamed these late and incomplete orders on labor shortages, supply constraints, and high freight costs. And high freight costs are not going to get better after the situation with the oil. I don't even have to go into detail about that. If you drive a car, you know what's going on. The chief executive officer of Brynwood Partners, which is the parent company of Pillsbury, said, "Wheat costs have soared, and shipments for ingredients, including vitamin C for Sunny D, are running behind. It's not just one thing, it's everything," is what he said. The director of imports and commodities at Gordon Food Service Inc. has also said, "Everything is going up. Almost everything is going up," is what he said. The president of Wise Pies has stated that their cost of transporting a load of their pizzas has more than doubled in price, and that the price of cheese has nearly doubled in price as well over the past month. It can be clearly seen in this article that the cost of doing business for all major food suppliers has been increasing sharply. Now, this article also details some of the more specific challenges that food suppliers are facing with logistics. Um, it's making some of them. It's making it really nearly impossible for some of them to operate their businesses. Is the way it's sounding. The CEO of Simply Food, which is a brand of ramen noodles, has reported that his company has received fines for delayed shipments and has expressed concern that his customers might start doing business with his competitors as a result. Recently, his company has been shipping their ramen via refrigerated containers and air transportation in an effort to complete shipments on time and to retain customers. In his own words, he said, "We've got to keep up shelf space, even if it's at a loss." Now, these are extremely unusual things to be happening in the supply chain. I've never heard, ever, of ramen noodles being shipped on refrigerated containers. The reason he's doing this, if you can't put two and two together, is because they're all out of normal containers, so he's forced to pay an additional price, an additional fee, an additional upcharge to have it shipped on a refrigerated truck because it's the only one that's available. Hopefully that makes it clear to you if you weren't able to understand that. Now, the co-CEO of Nicholas & Co., which is a major food supplier for restaurants, including Subway and Panda Express, has also been reporting major supply chain issues. Now, although the co-CEO, she managed to find a dairy farmer with an excess inventory of milk. The milk processors were unable to produce enough plastic bottles to package the milk due to a major shortage of resin. Now, that's also something that's extremely unusual. It just goes to show that it's not just one thing, it's everything. Now, perhaps the most unique supply chain issue I thought that was brought up in this article was blue cheese shortage. So the CEO of the food distribution company Ginsberg Foods, she has claimed that it's been increasingly difficult to find suppliers with blue cheese, and she's attributed this decrease in blue cheese just to a decrease in cheesemakers' inventories that had began last year, because it takes several months to age blue cheese. She had said, "I can't make blue cheese any quicker," and it's true. Where blue cheese is going to be one of the first food shortages that we see. Despite all of these supply chain issues, the United States economy will likely to continue their growth for a few more months. As long as this demand from consumers is increasing or remaining the way it is, and supply chains are at least capable of meeting an increase in demand, GDP will continue to show growth. GDP is calculated by adding consumer spending, investments made by businesses, government spending, exported goods, and then subtracting imported goods. Now, like I said prior, it's the most widely accepted measurement of general economic growth. Now, after seeing all of this data, it should be self-evident that consumer spending is increasing. Right there. Investments made by businesses are going to continue increasing because, well, they have to meet this consumer demand. They have no choice other than to reinvest. And the government is likely to continue spending a lot of money to try to fix the problems that are going on right now. And regardless of imports and exports, those three things will drive gross domestic product upwards. However, these current economic conditions are not going to be sustainable in the long term. As mentioned earlier, consumer spending is at a record high, and it's continuing to skyrocket. Capacity utilization for industrial production has struggled to remain at just its 10-year average, and total production capacity isn't growing. As a result, we see that manufacturers' purchase prices are increasing and are continuing to increase. Right here, we can see in the PPI data. And while manufacturers are experiencing these sudden price increases, their typical reaction is going to be to allow their inventories to contract, which we're beginning to see right there in the Institute of Supply Management's Purchasing Managers Index for manufacturing. Then they may begin to slow down their operations, which I'm afraid we are starting to see here. While they are still growing, they are beginning to slow down as of the month of April, just last month. And eventually, they will just have to increase prices for their customers. They're likely to do those three things in that order. As we can see, the inventories are contracting. I'll expect next to see a steeper contraction in inventories and a steeper contraction or a steeper slowing in growth of production and other kinds of business activity After seeing that, prices are just going to skyrocket. Is what I believe will happen. Uh, Manufacturers' customers' inventories are shrinking at a record pace. Manufacturers are just showing lower inventory sentiment, and their order backlog is increasing as well, very, very rapidly, as well as their delivery times. This subindex measures delivery times, and we can see that delivery times have been growing very, very quickly as well. Eventually, materials will become scarce for retailers, and they will be forced to raise prices on consumers in order to keep products in stock and to generate enough profit just to keep their business afloat. If these trends continue at their current pace, United States manufacturers will not be able to keep up with their customers' orders. Their customers' inventories will continue contracting, and supply chains will dry up to a dangerous degree by the end of the year. However, it is possible that this could happen even sooner if consumers realize these trends early on and begin panic buying. This situation would only accelerate the depletion of the supply chain and could cause mass hysteria in under a month. And just now, I prepared for this video prior to this news coming out, but seeing the oil situation has me a little bit more worried because transportation requires oil. And people are beginning to panic buy oil, and they're beginning to pay more attention because of this situation. So, I wanted to release this video actually a little bit later, but I decided I needed to release it now because things could start happening really quickly. And what good would this video be if I released it after everything had happened? So, here is your warning. I made an entire video about it and showed you all of the data that I looked at to come to this conclusion. I hope that you enjoyed it, and I hope that this inspires you to do your own research and to come to your own conclusions about what's going on in the world. Have a nice day. Peace.